Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the AWE Digital Wellness Podcast. We have a very special guest with us today on the podcast. Zen Tharani is here to speak with us about AI. Where is he? Where did he go? He's here to speak with us today about sustainability in AI and digital health. And
Yes, great
as
message.
always, Christian Dominique joins me. This is going to be really, yeah, very interesting conversation, fellas. And we have a lot of people dialing in, tuning in today. So there's a lot of interest in this topic, a lot to cover. So really looking forward to both of you. So before we begin, maybe Zen, you can introduce yourself to the audience, tell everyone what you do and why what you have to say is just very prescient and relevant for today's modern age.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm joining you from Victoria, British Columbia. And I hope people are joining me because they want to know what I have to say, not because they want to see me make a fool of myself. So
Both are
I
fun.
am, both are fun. I'm excited about both. So my background is in digital health. I've been working in this field for about 25 years. Um, been working both in the public and private sector, and especially in Canada, you end up always serving the public sector, right? Like so it's always kind of in some way in service to the public sector and to the patients of here in Canada. And I've been blessed to be working in this space for a while, um, and it's something that over the last few years I wanted to do more. So I've been doing a lot of these conversations around how do we get leadership thinking about longer term things. And AI is top of mind. Really excited about this conversation. And
I just want to add for the audience that Zen has been doing a lot of great work. He's also a TEDx speaker. He's won some fun awards, and we've had a few conversations before this. Really happy to share Zen's knowledge with the audience. And talking about leaders in healthcare, I've also been in digital health for almost 20 years, and wanted to give the audience statistics. As Mark said, I think we might be over 400 LinkedIn live viewers, and we're on other platforms. So maybe we'll reach 1,000 people interested. If you're live today, don't be shy to share some comments. We'll have some specific sections, but you can share or prepare your comments as we go through this. So the first statistics I wanted to share with the audience is that over 90% of healthcare leaders have said that they will implement AI in the next 12 to 24 months. So over 90%. So that's why it's so important that we talk about this, because how are they going to implement it? Is it going to be useful? And what are your thoughts on that, Zen?
I think leaders don't have a choice at the moment, right? Like this is in every sector, but healthcare specifically, even if they don't feel that they're ready to implement, they are being asked to implement, right? Or being told to implement, or being, quote unquote, forced to implement, because that's where things are moving to. So I was just looking at some stats this morning, and this is from a list an organization has put together about AI projects going on in healthcare, and they have a very, high level inventory, and they're at like 162 documented going on in Canada right now. And I don't think it's anywhere close to what is actually happening. But what was really important in this is the stages that these organizations are at. So out of the 162, 100 are still in pilot, right? And 20 are scaled, 9 are system wide, 38 are in use, like normal use, and 9 are in planning. It's like it's everywhere. It's happening. People are trying to figure this out. This is where the sector is being forced to. But this is no different than any other pressure that the healthcare sector feels, right? Like I think we need to also kind of put it in perspective. This is an added pressure that the healthcare leaders are feeling.
You're saying that the healthcare
pace
is
of
under
it.
pressure? I don't believe you, Zen.
No,
Healthcare
this
is
is the
perfect.
new thing.
What pressure?
It's a new world and it's coming fast. That's the thing. I think the pace of it is way different. I do feel COVID was a practice for this. How quickly can we do things and how thoughtfully we can do the things. And there is a lot of learnings from there that I don't feel are translating over. But yeah, we'll get
Well,
into it.
I think you said the perfect word, thoughtful. So how can we help the audience and leaders and people in different organizations, healthcare and otherwise, be thoughtful about implementing, thinking about AI, thinking about the readiness for it, thinking about the strategy, and thinking about it in a sustainable way, right? So I guess a question would be, we're rushing to the race, we're going to implement in 12 months. I've seen catastrophe in healthcare, as you might know, projects that take years to implement and then years later they're not useful, right? So they stay there, but they're not useful, or they're not being used at all, right? So I think one of the question is, how can we make sure that we implement AI that will be there in 6 months or 12 months or 5 years? And what do we need to think and do to make that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. A few thoughts come to mind. So first, one of the things that it's kind of become my mantra in digital health specifically, that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? We need as a sector to be able to maintain our stamina. The more we find, the more integrated we get with digital health, the more opportunities there are going to be, right? And the pressure is going to continue to increase. We can't do it alone, right? The real power in any change is people, right? And one of the things I'm finding it happens very commonly right now is people forget that leaders are humans, right? Like they're not superhumans. They're humans. They're trying to navigate this thing just like anybody else is, but they've got added responsibilities, right? And the one of the really put on LinkedIn was that there's this compression going on, right? Compression is the leaders usually seem to have like a bit more knowledge or a bit more comfort or a bit more space. That isn't true anymore. Right? Things are moving as fast, and sometimes their teams are ahead of them, and sometimes the leaders are. So finding that and acknowledging it and being okay with it is going to be really important, right? So
Wow,
that's one thing that is loud and clear in my mind.
great analysis. It's true that with first there was the internet, but now with AI, staff people can figure out, can ask, can prompt to get knowledge that is sometimes close, equivalent, and sometimes superior to their leaders. And I think that's a good thing. I think you want to have team members that are better than you, that learn more, that challenge you. Um, but it's an important thing to acknowledge that's we're starting to see that space. There's just some caveat. I always explain to people that experts can use AIs better than juniors, and if juniors are trying to use AI and not use their head, then that's going to also not be sustainable in the long run. And when you say human leaders are human, that's good. Maybe one day AI will be the leaders. We don't know. Just making jokes. Possible. But how can leaders use those insights to put people first, and to also, how can tech companies and AI company create, we're building AI at AWE. We're going to be releasing our next AI next week. How can AI be more human centric in design? How can we design the implementation, the product, or the whole ecosystem to be more sustainable?
Yeah, I think there's lots to do. For leaders, I think it's really important. In general, they need to know where they're trying to go, right? So AI, one of the clients that we were working on recently, they were at a point where the AI conversation was actually pushing their strategy forward. You have to take a step back to just say, digital health strategy is something that is your roadmap, right? Like it kind of gives you an idea. The strategy will change in a couple of years, right? You need to refresh it probably faster than you've ever had to. But what was important were the principles and the guiding principles and how we work together and how we make decisions embedded into that strategy that are going to create the sustainability path. And in that, you're having a conversation about AI, right? In that, saying that where is it that we actually need this power, right? There's one saying that to somebody with a hammer, everything is a nail. That's not. We're seeing that in a lot of organizations. We don't have the capacity or even a thought that we should come in our mind that we don't have the luxury is the word I'm looking for. We don't have the luxury to waste time on that stuff. We need to be surgical about it, right? You say, here is our strategy. Here is where we feel or we know that AI can play a part. That doesn't mean we don't try things out, but that's control, right? Like that's in an environment that can get scaled up. The whole sector can't become your test bed, right? I think it's important to give it some boxes. And in the past, the whole environment should be an innovation test bed. Yes, when there's not other things that you're trying to deal with. There's pressures of getting primary health care sorted out. There's pressures of getting, home care sorted out. There's a lot of things going on, right? So how do we find the right place to embed?
No, you're still here. A little bit choppy, but we can hear you. Thanks again for this insight. I was last week talking to Foundry BC, the biggest youth mental health for 12 to 24 in BC, and their priority is looking at the flip side, not only implementing AI, although they have a digital health strategy, but also figuring out how digital health AI affects mental health, right? So it's also, and that's externally, people are known now to have different issues with using AI at work or at home. We know that AI has been used as companionship and as therapy in the wrong ways. That's why we're trying to create more ethical and safe AI for coaching and mental health at all. But the most important, issue is, can we also imagine that AI used in a team, in a hospital, in a clinic, is also affecting the mental health of the workers, right? So you talked about, the sentiment that is the team more advanced or not? What's the productivity? What's the knowledge base? And is AI use also something that should be communicated in terms of preparing change management? What are your thoughts on the effect that AI implementation can have on people?
Yeah, for sure. So I know I don't know if it's me that's choppy or you, Christian, but like it kind of the voice comes in and out. But I think I got the gist of what you're.
I can repeat the last. So I guess I can repeat to reframe this. When AI is implemented in an organization, it's affecting people, and people might have fear, and they might justify it or not. That's basic change management, and also, how does that impact their feelings, their fear of failure, perhaps, and their mental health in general. Is that clear? And Mark, do you want to maybe chime in? Maybe
Is it me? Like I'm trying to figure this out. Like or are you guys?
Yeah,
Like, is there another?
it it seems like Zen is a little bit choppy, but I would love to chime in with that question. So, I actually heard a story yesterday, or there's an online story called "The Whispering Earring." I recommend anybody who's watching to look it up. But basically, the premise of the story is that there's a guy who gets an earring, and this earring whispers into his ear everything that he should do in life. And it always starts off like, if I were you, I would do this. And so the guy just goes through life following all the advice that the earring gives him, and he becomes a pillar of the community. He becomes very successful, and he's following all the advice that this earring gives him. And at the end of his days, he dies, and they do an autopsy, and they realize that his brain had just withered away. His brain is nearly non-existent, but he has all these accomplishments and achievements. And I think what the story really illustrates is that a dependence on AI, outsourcing our thinking to AI, might achieve a surface level result that we might have strived for, but what is the cost to our own biology? And I thought it raised a really interesting question, which is, does it even matter if our own biology withers away, if we have achieved what we wanted, the outcome in the process? So I think for many people using AI nowadays, it is very effective, right? But if there was a power outage, I know there's a snowstorm going through the US right now. If there's a power outage, if the internet doesn't work, who are you when the AI is taken away, when the internet is taken away, and all of a sudden you feel like you have no crutch to lean on any longer? I think that's a bigger question. As we become more and more embedded in technology and the internet, our lives, who we identify ourselves, become inseparable from the internet itself.
and I can add another analogy of people being able to direct themselves without Google Map, right? So before, people used to try to figure out
Exactly.
if your phone is dead and you don't have Google Maps, you cannot find simple things, right? Or most people. I still
Exactly.
can.
Well, yeah,
uh,
my dad my
Go ahead.
my dad used to print out MapQuest. I don't know if you remember MapQuest back in the day. And every time we'd go on a road trip, we would be making sure that we hit the right exit, right? Because if you miss the exit, then all of a sudden you're kind of screwed. You have to go back, and then you have to figure out, like, okay, where, because there is no recalibrating, there's no application, Google Maps. And so yeah, I think there is a case to be made for um, losing something in the process of outsourcing a lot of your capabilities to not just AI, but just technology in general, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I used to print out MapQuest and drive to New York and other places. Yeah, so I'm familiar with that, and I'm also to maps in Iceland road trip, and people are like, "Why are you using maps?" But yeah, they're useful,
it-
and there are some places that have Wi-Fi or things like that. Welcome back, Zen.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have better connection now? Can you hear us?
Okay.
So yeah, the
Yeah, I think this connection to Restream has been hard, but let's keep going.
No
no problem.
problem.
It takes a lot of resources. So if you're running a lot of
Mm.
applications and AI in your computer, that's the problem then. No. So seriously, we were talking about how that implementation, that preparation could not infect, in fact, affect employees or caregivers. What are your thoughts on not only the efficiency, but the human cost or gains that we can have by implementing it?
I think
Are
we
you
may have lost him again. Can you hear us, Zen?
no problems? Then let us know when you can hear us. We'll
Mhm.
continue topic. Talking about, like, we talked about 90% of people in the healthcare want to or plan to implement AI. What does that also feel for teams and organization and leader in terms of the pressure, and how can we talk about the concept? Then you and I have been talking for months, Mark, calm tech, and how that can help prevent that kind of stress and urgency and anxiety that you need to be AI like yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I think that we're specifically talking about healthcare workers today, correct? So we're talking about hospital workers or psychotherapists, people in outpatient, inpatient clinics. So that is a very high stress, high urgency environment, right? And also to add it to the stakes is like you have people's lives on the line that you are serving, right? So if something goes wrong, then there can sometimes be irreparable consequences, lawsuits, especially doctors. Doctors are more worried about avoiding lawsuits nowadays than actually treating patients, dealing with insurance companies. So there's a lot of pressure, and AI can help. It definitely can help outsource a lot of the work. But I think that, once the productivity increases, the expectations of the worker also increase, and also the expectations of the output of the hospital overall. Yeah. Zen, why don't you share your thoughts on that? What do you think?
Yeah, I saw this. Like, I had to change the browser, and I think hopefully it's better now. So here's the thing: exactly what you're talking about, and this was a really good example, right? I'm in an urban area, and this kind of stuff is happening, right? Like it's that how quickly digital transformation is happening, and the digital divide is actually happening even farther, right? Like it's the gap is expanding a lot. And you're right. What's happening now is the more benefits we see through tool integration into the health sector, the demand. Do you lose me again? There we go.
Yes.
So COVID
No, we're
played a
here.
really big
We're
part
here.
in this because we know as a sector, we can deliver fast, deliver thoughtfully, deliver well. That set the bar, right? So now everything gets consciously, subconsciously, everything gets evaluated based on our ability to do this well, right? And any of these things that are like the frustration amongst the people who are using the healthcare space is growing. Equally, the frustration amongst the leaders is growing, right? Because for a
Yes.
while, they had the ability to make the decisions quickly and do it well because they're closer to these things and they understand the impact that this can happen if we implement it wrong, because it does have human lives at stake and healthcare workers' mental health at stake. But that was a rubber band effect, right? When I was talking, like in COVID, I used to talk about that. The rubber band effect is like, it'll be really interesting to see if our leadership style and decision-making style will actually go back to what it was, or we're going to be able to keep the pressure on. And I think that's what we're seeing is that leaders are trying to make change and do it better and do it faster, more thoughtfully, but within the bureaucracy that they have to deal in, right? And that's always going to be the case in our healthcare system. It's not something that we can eject. So that's the challenge that the leaders always have. Because
when we talk about accelerated change, are we seeing perhaps something we could call change fatigue as well? When people needing to change so fast, needing to adopt faster, quicker, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because this is not in isolation, right? Like what I was saying is like there's a lot of stuff already happening. There is, clinical information system consolidation projects going on. There are kind of administrative systems going on. There is new strategies being rolled out with like health human resources. There's new strategies being rolled out for primary health care, care. There is a lot going on, right? And there is change because all of it is also hinges on digital enablement, right? So if we talk about digital transformation, digital enablement, AI being part of it, is at service to the business strategies, right?
Mm.
That means any working in the digital space in the healthcare sector is going to be full on engaged if you're doing it right, right? It's not in isolation, because one of the things we've, I think, finally trying to make that change is that technology doesn't drive business, business drives technology. I think we can means the leadership capacity and the people who are around them have to have that capability and capacity to deliver at that. And I don't think we've paid attention to that as a system.
Yeah.
I don't think we've brought people along and built that digital capability and digital excellence in organizations. AI demands it.
Well, we can classify this as readiness, right? Technological readiness or AI readiness, change implementation readiness. I think that a lot of the work in terms of designing a good implementation has to do with the strategy, right? So we can think about, first of all, why are we implementing AI? Like what are the problems that we're trying to solve with this implementation, and be very clear and specific about what that is. And then, are we ready for that? Who in the team is ready? Do we need some training? Do we need some in or out consulting work to help us be ready for that? And what's the potential benefits and costs? And let's not only measure them in terms of X, Y, Z metrics, but also more holistic. What does that cost individuals, organization, patients, or clients or employees? All those things need to be kind of considered before just saying, hey, let's be first to the race and launch in 90 days. I think those are the concepts and the tools, the questions that we should ask to have more sustainable implementations of AIs and other tools, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I honestly do feel there are voices that need to be included in the conversation. There's an expectation that the leaders are trying to meet, and the expectations come from many places. They come from healthcare providers. There's lobbying going on all the time around, we need to implement AI scribe in family practices. We need to do this. We need to do that. There's constant vendor engagement happening. We've got a new tool. We want to talk to you about this. You want to talk to you about that. And one of the importances is the patient voice, right? You say, what is it that the people ultimately that we're trying to serve? In all of us who are in the sector are trying to serve the patient, right? One way or another. What is it that they're looking for?
I was part of some patient advocacy group and working with lived experience. Very, very important. Thanks for bringing that up, Zen. It's something that we often forget when we think about stakeholders in healthcare. What's the end goal is positive health and wellness outcome, right? And that's not the leaders or the bureaucrats or even the healthcare workers that are going to really know what's happening. It's the patients, the ultimate people we're trying to serve, right?
I have a question.
And in some of the
go. Don't you think ultimately that AI, like the utopian view, would be that AI, overtakes all of the mundane tasks that doctors, nurses are saddled with, like the bureaucratic paperwork, the dealing with the insurance companies, the dealing with the legal onslaught, all that stuff that is distracting them from actually offering the best patient experience? Because at the end of the day, you said patients, they want a better experience. And what's one of the reasons that doctors aren't spending as much time with the patients anymore? One, there's less doctors, yeah, for sure. There's a higher demand. There's a lot of more patients are coming through, but also it's I see it as a productivity issue that a lot of the healthcare workers, they're spending a lot less time seeing patients now because of the business model of the hospital, just to see as many patients as possible. Don't you think that AI can help solve this problem, by delegating more of these tasks to the AI, and so that you think so?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that come into mind are this. One, as you were speaking about it, I think there is no doubt we can use AI to solve some of these mundane things, guaranteed. In lots of different businesses, I'm integrating it into this. Others are too. It's happening. I think what we'll stop doing is questioning why we have these mundane processes at all. Just because maybe that's also an effort we need to do, to just say, why the heck do we need to have all of this stuff? Right? Let's not just get better at doing something bad. Right? Just faster at doing something bad. So what, why is there so much paperwork? Why is there the red tape there? That ability to ask questions is going to go away because it's going to be really easy to automate these things, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is we saw this in the EMR space. When the EMRs were coming out, there was a massive consolidation. There's lots of big healthcare organizations that what I call went shopping, right? They went shopping, they bought out a lot of EMR data. That's what they were going after. Pipeline of, submissions of everything. Same is going to happen in the AI tools. That consolidation is going to, which one is going to win? I don't know. But the burden of making it work will then fall onto the system. That's what happened when EMRs got merged. And see, the burden came onto the public health system to say, okay, now what do we do? Right? That's going to happen with the AI tools also. With scribes, it's going to happen, right? So those are some of the things we need to also think about. It doesn't mean we don't engage in it. It just means that the experiences that may not be completely, comparable, but there's knowledge that we've got as a sector and leaders. And we use that to kind of project to say, what can and may happen? And how do we actually equip our team around us? How do we scale them up with their abilities to be able to see that? So you don't need people like me. That's what the thing is. That's how we create sustainability.
Well, hopefully we'll always need people like you that can look at this in a very holistic way. I need you. You brought us some points that I want to repeat in a different way for the audience and make sure that I got clear. One of them is your point number one, saying, okay, we can automate, but what are we automating? And do we want to make sure before we automate and periodically check, is this even useful? Is this the best way to do things? Is there a need for red tape? Is there a need for this procedure?
Yeah.
How can we not only make it faster, but there's this whole saying about climbing fast up the wrong ladder, right? So are we trying to go faster in something in a direction that we don't want to go? And if so, where in the process are we always checking that we're doing the right thing for the right reason? That's a very good point. And the second one, I would just add on what you said about how we can use our previous knowledge to kind of go ahead and try to think about it before we do some of the same mistakes. You talked about data, right? So my question, everything is big data and now AI, more and more computer power that we'll need, not only from the Restream link that we're having, but can you think more about human-centric instead of data-centric approaches, right? Everything is about data, patient data, and okay, in healthcare we need HIPAA compliance, GDPR in Europe, and all those things, SOC 2, but about the patient, about the human, about people using the data, about not just the quantity and quality of the data, but what's the human-centric aspect that we can integrate when we make decisions about data, big data, and AI?
I really one of the biggest gaps that I'm seeing is data that we have is still one-sided. I don't think it represents the diversity and the communities that we have in Canada fully, right? I think that's a really big gap, right? If you look at the Indigenous data and talking about, you know, how these models are trained, it's that trust. I think that word, the trust word, is really important in the conversations we're having. That trust isn't there in the tools within the Indigenous communities, right? So if we have this challenge that the data that we have does not treat everybody equally, because our system doesn't treat everybody equally, right? So if we're using this data and actually teaching models and looking at them to be our saviors, right? These tools, what are we actually risking, right? And that I don't know if we're having those conversations, right? Because one of the things we know, very data rich sector that we live in. Health's got a ton of data on everything. How we use it, how we understand it, how we match it, how we kind of consolidate it and actually have a story about the citizens, about the healthcare providers, about everything is not there.
Very
The
good
data
point.
analytics capabilities, the data analytics capabilities and the AI capabilities are being built at the same time right now in the sector. Usually, you would expect the data analytics capabilities to be there before you bring in these tools. It's not the case. Not everywhere.
Thanks for
So
bringing.
that is something that we, how do we balance this?
Yeah, the human factor, and it's not just about diversity and inclusion. It's about representation of the real human population, right? And you talked about the Indigenous, and we can say this for almost any marginalized community or minority, that the AI and the data are not representing them well, and that's very important to kind of do that. We have internally at Digital Wellness some ethical AI internal and external consultant to look at our data infrastructure to make sure that we're looking at some of those biases. So we're trying to be a front runner for ethical AI and sustainable and thinking about those things, but it's not the majority of companies. Thanks for bringing that up. It's something very important to me and our team as well. And we hope to spread the awareness and message that most companies should be doing this when they're developing those tools, and also critical when you're using them and thinking about that as a systemic and an important factor. So really glad that you brought this point. So.
Yeah, one of the analogies I use when I'm talking to leaders about this, and even me to get my head around when I don't progress, is when I look at the construction sites, and I look at the amount of work that happens before you see the building up.
The foundation.
That invisible work. We don't see it when we're driving around. There is work happening. And it's not just haphazard work. It's very calculated work, right? With the vision to say, this is what we want this thing to look like. So that means this is what this needs to look like. That work is not something that gets funded. That's work. That work is not sexy work, but it's important work. And that is what's going to show the benefits in the long run, right? But this is the challenge. This is the challenge that humans, leaders are feeling, is they want to do the right thing. They want to build those foundations strong. At the same time, they're being asked to deliver within 30, 60, 90 days. How do you do that?
And
somebody's got to be able to say.
I'll give you and the audience a fun analogy, as I've traveled quite intensively and extensively in the world. And I always give this analogy where, in China, you want a building built, it'll be done next month, right? So there's no red tape. It's like, okay, we're building this, it's done, right? And that's good in some things, because in some other countries, Europe and North America, we might have too much red tape, right? But is it good in the other way? Well, how many buildings crash and are not or fall apart or whatnot? And so it's always that balance on like what do we need and do we know precisely what we need to do to plan and to build that foundation that is good, without having to wait forever and look at the like just to give you another example, we're finally building the fast train from Quebec City to Toronto. There was 4 other projects in red tape trying to build Montreal, Toronto, New York fast train because Mark is in Europe now. There is a lot of better trains in Europe and in Asia, but in North America, I couldn't do it because we're using too much cars. People will not use the train, and then paperwork never gets done, right? So we've been talking about this for 40 years. Finally, we're starting to do it. It'll be ready in 10 years. So there's sometimes too much red tape, sometimes not enough. And just to think about, again, what are we trying to solve? What do we need for it to be sustainable and long-term? And, what actors, internal, external factors we should think about, thinking about patients, population, different populations, diverse population, right? So all those tools hopefully are useful for the audience to think about how can we bring better sustainable AI and other tech in healthcare and also in other sectors. And thanks so much for the discussion so far. Just wanted to take a quick pause before Mark's comments, also to say if anyone is live and have some questions, now would be a good time to put them on the chat. We'll try to respond. So Q&A time for anyone that has questions for Zen or us. And Mark, what are your thoughts so far about the ongoing discussion?
I had a bit of a separate question, and maybe it's just my ADHD mind, but I remember seeing this picture on Reddit of an emergency room doctor using ChatGPT to figure out what illness a patient was presenting, and was literally asking ChatGPT like, how do I treat this? I wanted to ask you, what sort of use cases do you feel with AI are completely inappropriate in healthcare? Like this is a blatant example, like with the doctor. And what sort of use cases are perhaps more so permitted or, would be really advantageous?
Good question. It's hard to say because here's the thing. I tell CEOs that if they suspect that AI is being used in their organization, I'm like, take that suspicion out being used. The danger is that we don't know how and where it's being used, right? So if we don't have a culture where we can talk about it, we're gonna get inappropriate use of AI, right? I can guarantee you positive thing. There is zero doubt, right? It is being used just because it's like that way. And I think this is where it comes down. We get into implementing what are the guidelines that we are going to set apart for people who work with us and work is that this is appropriate and this is not. I think that work needs to be done. I don't have a clear answer to that. What I can say is it's probably happening for diagnosis. It's probably happening for ideas back and forth to help you or help somebody kind of figure out and narrow down things. I would doubt it wasn't happening. And it's dangerous. It can be, right? Like, so I think having that knowledge and a culture of like, yeah, we use AI and here's where we use it. And here's where we don't use it. It's going to be really important.
I agree to differentiate that. And just to add to this, we're talking about diagnosis. I've been working with AI diagnosis for 9 or 10 years now. It's been early, but it's been getting better and better. Some tools I was working was better than 4-year doctor, and so sometimes AI can be useful. I think what's important is to delimitate what is good, and also to always include human judgment, right? Because AI hallucinates. AI is not perfect. Human also makes errors. We have to be clear about that humans are not perfect either. But it's kind of using them to assist each other, not to compete, would be kind of the ideal situation. And just wanted to answer a question from the audience, which is thanks for your question, Xuri, asking what you think, Zen, about confidentiality. How, any concrete strategy for confidentiality in digital health?
I think if organizations already don't have a very strong handle on confidentiality, moving into this new space is going to be even harder, right? Like, I think it goes back to the same thing that we were talking about, is what are your current things look like that you can actually build on? What it's going to do with the AI kind of speed that it's going at, it's going to blow holes into what you've created already, right? Because we didn't anticipate these things when we're talking about this. And that's the world we're dealing with right now. So looking at it from that perspective is going to be really important. That means, and we know, like in our healthcare sector, there's a lot of focus on confidentiality, privacy. Looking at it from that lens and not trying to build on what was built for the past, and actually building it for the future and make it more robust is there, I think, is important right now. Right. And one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is, like, people say, well, AI is going to take my job. This conversation, AI can't take away, right? Like, this type of thinking around what do we actually want to do and how do we want to get there is the magic sauce of humans, right? This is where we need to be using it to augment and taking away things that we don't want to be dealing with, but actually can really become a knowledge society, to be talking about important things that will set the future in the right direction. And confidentiality is one of those things. It's like looking at what we've got now, but looking at it from that lens to say, will this actually stand in the future world? And if we don't know what that is, that means, where do we want it to go, right? Like, how do we actually, again, it needs to look at where do you want this to go and how do you your policies and things fit into it, right? It's going to force that into.
Thanks for that insight, Simon. Again, thanks for the question. If you have other questions during, or we'll have another Q&A closer to the end, but feel free to ask questions as they come along. I would say that confidentiality is very important in healthcare, of course, but also in non-healthcare, and a lot of implementation and strategies around. Not a lot of people are building their own Gen AI, so a lot are using existing LLMs. And for instance, companies, what I would suggest and what we did internally is also looking at robust, confidentiality clause with the LLMs that you're using, if you're using any. Some have better clauses than others. Some have better confidentiality, can silo the data. You can also internally silo some data. There's a lot of strategies that you can do to increase the confidentiality as a whole when you look at it holistically, and not just one patient data or one application. It's really to think about confidentiality as a whole and how you want to implement and safeguard those keys and confidentially data. You can also use encryption, decryption, all types of tools, technical tools, but it's more about the strategy behind what you want to do and then finding the tools that serve that. Right? Again, human first and tech not leading the pack, right?
Exactly. I have a quick question that I wanted to dive in. So we were talking about use cases for AI in healthcare before, and radiology is perhaps one of the clearest examples of where AI benefits, right? If you have a human being looking at an X-ray or a CT image, and they are able to accurately identify a type of cancer 95% of the time, versus an AI model that is operating within very strict guardrails, has a very clear outcome and purpose that effectively achieves accuracy 98 or 99% of the time. The person who this concerns the most is the patient. the patient will willingly choose the AI because of a 4% difference in accuracy, because it's their life that it concerns ultimately. This is a very clear-cut example where when the guardrails are clearly defined, AI in healthcare is very beneficial, right? I think when the guardrails are not very clearly defined, that's when it can become confusing. When people just use AI with a prompt like, hey, how do I treat this patient? What should I do? What do you think I should do here? We've seen that it has a very sycophantic sort of tendency to just agree with whatever people say, like, yeah, it definitely sounds like cancer, right? When it could just be a mosquito bite in reality. I mean, that's an extreme example, but we still have to be very careful with the application, because in a sense, if we don't give the AI a very specific prompt or task, or even set guardrails, it can lead us down a path where we are just beholden to whatever the algorithm tells us, in a sense. Do you have any thoughts on that, Zen?
Absolutely. It makes it makes our echo chamber even bigger, right? Like if we don't use it properly,
Yeah.
it will just tell us what we want to hear. We've all seen it happen. In the radiology example, it's the pattern recognition and it getting better is when we're trying to solve the problem in healthcare. I always like to challenge our sector to say what happens that before that image gets into somebody. Where is the actual bottleneck? Is the bottleneck in reviews, or is the bottleneck that we can't get the test done, or is it both? Right? So yeah, we can make the reviews faster and get them out and more accurate that stuff, but the throughput is still slow, right? So how do you balance that? To just say that we're one thing, what impact is it going on the other side, and how do we enable and help solving that, be connected to our program area, but it all affects us, right? So that kind of a unity in our healthcare system is really important, to say, yeah, I can solve this problem, make it faster, but it really doesn't solve everything that we're trying to solve for that patient. So how do we actually look at it, the whole thing, right? I think it's going to be really important to keep challenging and asking the question, to the point that people who are going to ask these questions are going to sound like noise in the room. But it's really important to say, what problems are we creating with this? Or what opportunities are we creating that we can also solve with this, right? That makes the whole experience better.
Thanks for your question, Mark. Very good. And I've worked with radiology, so very good example. And thanks for your answer, Zen. And again, I love always your big picture thinking, systemic. What does this impact before, after, during? How can we make it, holistic approach? Love it. I would also add, as the clinical insight, right? So we're using AI to help clinical diagnostic, but it's again to help, right? So let's say, Mark, that 99% is better than 95. Sure, but does AI have the context? The family history, how many times at the hospital? Maybe they have some information, right? But the physician should be able to use that AI diagnostic or non-diagnostic and put it in context and make a better clinical decision, and maybe have other reviewers, humans and non-human, right? So it's always about, okay, let's use the best tool to help us do that, but also let's always put it in context and try to find the best solution. Thank you both for that. And we have another question from the chat. Which AI and non-AI tools do you see to be adopted that is addressing confidentiality issues? And in the same vein, another question
I don't even know what to say to that. It's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know. No, but
So the another question with the similar kind of sphere of question about security, is there any cybersecurity issues that we know already? Do you think there's cybersecurity issues around AI? So either issues or specific solutions. You guys have any thoughts? Maybe you use pen and paper. You'll be safe. That's the. Yeah,
I
don't
think
know.
there's always going to be yeah, it's not going to be any different than it is right now. I think there's going to be more areas where the system is susceptible, and this is why I think people who are kind of well and really knowledgeable and actually pay attention to these things and are keeping up to it, and our staff and the team members that the public sector with building that capacity is going to be really important, right? I think these are exactly the type of questions we should be asking and figuring out. Oh, we have this question. How do we figure this out? How do we want to approach this, right? And that's going to be really important. That dialogue is really important. But if we're not making it of our culture to have those conversations and just looking at, let's just keep implementing, let's just keep doing tools, these problems are going to become bigger. And then we're going to deal with some other issues that we're just kicking the can on.
Thanks. To add to that, I will say that, in terms of AI tools, I don't know of any today. There might be some great companies that are trying to address that. In terms of non-AI, I would say just as a practice, as you mentioned, Zen, there is always risk. There's risk for patients. There's risk for security. Life is risk, and we're all going to die even with good healthcare, right? So it's about reducing the risk in business as well. It's about business is risky as well. It's about reducing the risk. And I would say it's about first saying where the risk can be, and then we can, create metrics of how likely it is, how damaging it is, if that risk arrives. And then we can also try to say, well, what risk mitigation strategies are there? How much time and resources are going to cost us? And how can we really realistically reduce the risk to an acceptable rate? For instance, my father was in quality assurance for the Canadian Space Agency, and he was working on the International Space Station and looking at the risk to send a robot arm crashing the space station or killing astronauts or things like that, right? So and then in aerospace, same thing. So healthcare is also always about risk. So you need to know the risk and mitigate it as much as possible, knowing that there still is. And if you want to go one step further, document it and then review it periodically, right? And assess new levels of risk, new threats. So those are my non-AI human solutions to your question.
If I may add to the cybersecurity question, so my answer is also just some spectator answer. I don't have in-depth knowledge on the issues regarding cybersecurity, but I would just as a spectator say that there might be problems with consolidating all the data with one AI platform. Like if there would be one AI behemoth that ruled all in the healthcare sector, that one would need to invest a lot of resources into its own cybersecurity to prevent any cyber attacks or disclosure of any of the data that they house, right? If there was like an epic systems of AI, right, that just dominated the market, they would have to be very careful with the data and the privacy of that data that they collect.
Thanks, Mark. And as we talked about cybersecurity risk, I think frameworks are useful. It's not just to think about something in one way. It's to create frameworks that are useful and that are updatable. And we have another question here. Do you think IT people or coders we'll have more and more jobs based on this conversation. More jobs for coders. That's a vast question that goes beyond healthcare. What are your thoughts, Zen?
Every single profession is going to see a change of some sort, right? The impact of some will be higher than the other. What I think is going to be really important is that we the narrative of saying that coders are going to be non-existent. I think that's dangerous, right? If we as listen to that, I don't think we're going to be able to find a way forward in these things. So the challenging question that I would ask back is, where is it that we can actually use really good coders in the future, right? Because we know there's going to be a movement of, coding happening through tools, and there's going to be a movement of coding happening without tools. There's going to be a demand for that too, right? Going really, it's like, we're like, really, I know companies that are doing it. They said no AI in coding. They have made it their policy, right? They are working on some of the most innovative things, and they're saying, we're not using humans to do this, right? So that, I think there's going to be space for everyone. We can let fear drive the whole sector and make it happen, and it actually, test that fear, or we can say, let's just this a little bit. Where is it that we can actually use brain and use the skills that we've created, or the education that people are coming out with, and use it properly? That will also force universities and organizations to think differently on how their graduates are trained. It can't be an isolation. This way, but what do we need to do down the way supply chain, right, to make it actually work?
I love that answer, and it's always to think about, to summarize, where can we use those coders, right? So it's not, are they going to be more or less, or and actually, yes, it might affect economically the ability to have certain job or salary, but the most important thing is, I think you mentioned it, we do have a human brain, right? I think people forget that we do, but as Mark mentioned with the story and interesting analogy of, and we talked about this, we talked about the science, or cognition or decision making ability is getting lower because we're outsourcing it, right? So if you want to remain a good coder, that's your choice. It's not, is there going to be job? It's your responsibility as a potential coder to maintain that edge, meaning that there's things that you can do, and there's things that AI can do as well. So again, it's not about bashing tech or implementing all. It's always a balance. Finding the way. I explained to my team, we have about 10 people in our tech team. So in our tech team, we use a little bit of AI, and mostly we code, but AI can be useful for some things, right? So it's always a conversation and a collaboration, right? And when you use AI as something to challenge you, and you also can challenge AI back, then that gives the best result, right? Same thing with colleagues, right? Mark and I been working. I always challenge him. He challenges me back. That's how we do better, right? And AI should be something that is a tool, not something that does the work for you without a challenge. Both ways, right?
Absolutely. And it, it's really easy to fall into that trap, right? And let's just be really honest. There are so many demands on our lives. Outside of work, there's personal demands, there's social demands. It's easy, and it's the least friction in actually just doing it and using these tools to get to something faster. And it's addictive. It's addictive because you're doing it faster and you're like, oh my God, I can take on more, I can do more. But balance is so important. And if you think about it, and like at a more esoteric kind of way to look at it, like even when we think about humans and individuals, the way through things is through balance, right? Through being aware, right? It's no different, right? as organizations, we need to be balanced, be aware, right? So it always comes down to the individuals. It's like, what kind of a culture do we have in an organization that we can actually deal with change? We can deal with these things moving, and how do we support each other?
I love that, aspect of culture. And then we have a new question, but let me go back on this, right? Awareness, as you may know, AWE or A stands for awareness, wellness, and enjoyment. So we're always trying to create awareness inside ourselves, the team, and with our guest conversation. That's why we're having those podcasts, is to share this awareness with guests, with questions, and it's always a conversation, right? So thank you for saying that. And what does that mean in an organization or a healthcare organization? It is to create a culture of always increasing awareness. And one of the things that we did at All Digital Wellness is create the reset. So reset is 20 minutes, 25 minutes of really stopping to just do and starting to be and to be aware, so that when you come back, you have this bigger picture, which we've been talking, like very good awareness that you have, Zen, and thanks for sharing that with the audience. And that comes from taking positives, right? And that's really what we're trying to build with our tech, but also with our human-centered, guided audio. I'm doing one live tomorrow if people want to attend. So look at the digital reach at All Digital Wellness. And it's me tomorrow, but Mark and others are talking as well to create that space for that awareness and creating that as a culture for yourself, for your family, for your organization, so that we can think as human being. And what we need to think is to pause, right? Before, decision making made with anxiety and rush and stress is not good decision making. Neuroscience says that, then you can figure out the result for yourself if you made decision with stress or with anger or with anxiety, right? So thanks for sharing that. We have another question. Mark, do you want to read that one?
Could you read it? I can't see it on my screen.
Having experience with health sector and IT specifically, I can correlate AI as when cloud introduced. Where health sector were worried about where data will reside outside. Thanks for the comment. Do you want to comment further on that? It's same with AI, not just with healthcare sector, but other organization where they want to ensure all AI prompt to be secure within organization domain and not available to outside world. So they want to ensure that the AI prompt.
Yeah, it's.
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? Like it's the same thing. Anis is saying the same thing. Is that he's saying that every change introduces some sort of turbulence, right? And we get worried about it. We're like, oh, with cloud, this is what we're this, and that is the reality of our sector. That's a reality of business. Things are moving, and we're going to have to look at what we're doing and pivot, and whatever we need to do, make decisions based on what we know. What we want to be able to do is have the smartest people around us who can tell us what we know and what we don't know. And I think that's going to be really important, to put that capacity and create that sort of a culture where that digital, acumen and leadership acumen is important. One of the things that I was thinking about as Anis, the comment came up and we're talking about is, if you look at the budget in the public sector, in any organization, that's just not the public sector, how much of it actually goes towards education and professional development of people, right?
Not enough.
And there's two things. Many organizations, right? Not enough. That's your biggest asset. Right? It's your biggest asset, people. And how much are we actually putting towards that versus technology maintenance and refreshes, right? Let's put that in perspective. Second, even though organizations will say that, yeah, of course we support it, do you give people time to do it, right? Those things are going to be really important, right? If we don't make that part of our organization or how we lead or how we grow people, people are going to find shortcuts. People are going to use tools that they've got to deliver more, faster, and in their mind better, leveraging and actually putting the organization at risk in the long run. So here's the thing. We know this from experience. We know that this is important. There's the science behind it is that, we need to look after the people who are looking after the people. So we need to educate the people who are responsible for moving this forward, right? And that comes from coaching, that comes from programs being delivered, that comes from education, mentorships. That builds the strength of the organization to be able to say, oh yeah, cloud's coming, what are we going to do? Oh yeah, AI is coming, what are we going to do? What's our strategy? What are we going to do? Let's have this conversation. That's the magic that we're looking for.
Well, I will sleep better tonight knowing that there's people like you talking to healthcare leader, making it a little bit better. So yeah, thanks for that. Very interesting. And going from talking about AI and then tech. So I would say that AI there, then tech, then processes, frameworks, and then people should always be on top, right? So people as using the tech, as thinking about the tech, and also as being affected by the tech. We talked about many types of stakeholders. And what can we do? Again, like I've been a proponent of strategic HR since that word was invented, 25 plus years ago. And we're using, not just strategic as in playing chess, but like knowing that your biggest resource is not data, is the people, right? And we have a great team at AWE and other organizations have great people, but they don't often know how to get the best out of them. I've been also talking about workplace happiness and how we can help organization be happier, more purposeful, more engaged. And it doesn't hurt to have smart people around as well to look at some hard problems and challenges. But the motivation and giving ownership to people to solve problems and not to outsource solving problems and to come with creative solution, right? Coming with curiosity to the issue and coming with creativity to find new ways to deal with them. So completely in agreement, Zen, and hope that we get to reach and have conversation with some of those organizational leaders to help them implement and think about implementing those things. Apparently 90% of them are going to do it. So we're here to help. Any more thoughts?
Absolutely. No, I just want to say thank you for this conversation, and I sincerely apologize for this connection issue. But it does tell you like amount of dependency we have on technology. We need to have, the capacity to be able to handle when things don't go right. And I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate that you're asking these questions and people are asking these questions and are looking at it in a different way. I really feel that there isn't an or statement in our life, right? Like it's not, I believe it's an and statement in everything that we deal with, right?
Yes.
And it's like we can have this and this. That means we need to make some choices, right? We make some choices. Nobody's going to do that for us but us. If we can make those choices, yes, we can have this. That's the world I think we're in healthcare. To say, yes, we can have less wait lists and a digitally enabled sector. And we need to make some choices. We need to make choices like simple choices like, do all our facilities have? Okay, we don't. So you can't build on that.
Well,
you got to invest in it, right? So it's those things.
Thanks again for these thoughts. And as we're talking about, human and AI, it's very interesting that we've come talking about tech, digital health, and we just, something that I always notice is language, right? So I speak a few languages, and I think language is very important to communicate ideas, and also what type of language also affects your brain, your behavior, your psychology, and that of others. And when And when you say something like not or, not but and, these are things that I use myself. Whenever I say the word but, I correct myself to say and instead. And I tell people, I teach people how to do that to be happier. But those are small things. And again, those are human things, right? Language is human, although we have large language model. They're based on human speech, which is not always the best. But very good, again, small observation. We can do much more when we think differently and say, and, again, in also in improv, when people are improvising, like comedy improv, there's this thing saying, and, yes, and, right? So accept what is and add more. And so I love this kind of, we can always do more when we put our heads together, and really appreciate taking the time. This conversation was great as well on our side. Don't worry about the technical difficulty. Humans are human thought is going to be better than machine difficulty. No worries about that. And I think the audience really appreciated. We lots of questions. We have about 5 more minutes. If anyone else has some closing question. And Mark, what are your thoughts as we're closing this beautiful podcast?
Yeah, thank you so much for the insightful conversation as well. I didn't realize the applications of AI, the extent of the applications of AI in healthcare, and I come with my really basic knowledge of just radiology, and I do think one last thought is that perhaps we underestimate the impact that AI might have on the creation of jobs. And again, coming back to radiology for a second, the fear was that all radiologists would be completely out of a job, that there would be no more radiologists. But if you look at the data over the last couple of years, the number of radiologists in hospitals has actually increased on average. And some people might think like, well, why is that the case if AI is actually much better at the job of a radiologist than a radiologist is? Why is it that the number of radiologists has actually increased? And that's because the scope of what it means to be a radiologist has actually changed, so that their job now entails managing these systems, the AI that actually looks at for cancer instead of actually looking at the images. They're the ones who have to learn how to use the AI, how to use these tools to actually look, and that actually has created more job, new functions. So the role of the radiologist has actually changed completely, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see this in other healthcare careers as well.
Thanks for your thoughts and positive thoughts on end, right?
Absolutely.
So and AI
really
and more.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'll just reflect back on the earlier question that was about coders. Right? Like if you think about coders, like if we think about it from the same perspective, right? History's taught us that there is a different, it won't look the same. It'll be a little bit different. That doesn't mean it's going to be eliminated. So what is it? Right? It's awesome.
Great. Just to also leave with, for the audience, if you're a healthcare leader, think about, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready is your team to implement AI or even to think about it, right? So if 90% of leaders plan to do it or are doing it, really think about why and are you ready for it? Because people are the key, and these types of conversation you should be having internally. And we know someone called Zen if you want to have someone to come talk to you about this. Let's look at the last question.
Yeah.
A lot of questions we appreciate. Thank you, everyone, for asking those questions. Some of them difficult, which we like the challenge. So this one is organizations definitely need lots of coaching in that area. Oh, so exactly what we're talking about. Zed, can you tell the audience where we can find you on LinkedIn or other platforms?
Oh, for sure. I'm mainly on LinkedIn, so like look me up, Zen Tharani, and I try to share whatever I learned from real life experiences and how that relates to our work in leadership and AI and digital health. So subscribe to the newsletter that's on LinkedIn, and just reach out. Like it's about us. Like it's about humans connecting and getting to a better place. So let's just reach and have conversations. And I really thank you both for inviting me and playing a little part in, and hopefully in a really long and big story that we have as humans. as we kind of navigate
Yep.
this, not just in the health sector, but in other sectors, right? So I appreciate your time.
Well,
Thank you so much.
We do share the same passion to kind of have a small impact or a medium impact on the world, helping them with happiness, mental wellness, health, healthcare, and tech, all the things that you know quite a bit about. And thanks for sharing your insights, your questions. I had lots of fun sharing, and hopefully we'll do this some other time. Keep us apprised of what you're seeing, what you're doing. We'd love to keep in touch with people that are implementing those beautiful changes and creating more. So on that note, thank you again.
Thank
Mark,
you.
Right.
No, just thank you again for joining us. And I really look forward to seeing more of your work in the future.
A special note for our listeners,
Awesome. Take care.
our podcast is going very, very good. We're having a few guests. We have a guest tomorrow. So if people want to join us tomorrow, we have another podcast. What Survives When AI Comes for Design Education with special guest Lefteris Heretics. That's tomorrow, February 24th. So tune in if you want, and we'll have another podcast on Friday. So busy week for Mark and myself. Thanks, Zen, for joining today, and thanks for the listeners for all the questions and the attendance. We appreciate it and hope it was useful. Have a beautiful day, everyone.